In this tutorial we're going to take a look at creating tenants. Tenants are the person or group of people that are renting the properties from us. So we go to tenants, and I'm going to add a new tenant down here. Like other things, we need to enter a short code, something that we will remember. I'm going to call this one tenant 2, enter in their name. And down here we select the property that we have created previously, which property they're occupying. So I'm going to say they're occupying property number 2. We need to enter in a start date. The end date is optional. If you know what the end date is, you can enter it. If we don't know when exactly they're going to leave, we can leave the end date empty. The rent review date is optional, and if we're going to be tracking inspections through RentHQ, you normally want to enter an inspection frequency, like maybe every 3 months or something like that. Down here we can set the tenancy status, whether it's open, closed, or closed allow transaction entry. The difference between closed and closed allow transaction entry, you choose closed allow transaction entry if the tenant has left, but you still want to be able to enter transactions against this tenant, like maybe they have left owing money and we expect to be able to receive that money in future. So we'll close them, but we'll leave them in a situation where we can still enter transactions through the cash book. If they're closed, then we can't enter any more transactions against them. Down here we can enter a contact address. Over here we can enter contact details for the tenants. Now when we first create a tenant, we can only create one contact, but I'll show you how to create the others later. So we can say this is the, maybe we've got a husband and wife, so this is the husband. We can enter their email address and their phone details. A number of the other tabs are greyed out at the moment. We have to save the tenant before we can fill these in. The custom field tab is another one we can enter. On here we can add any additional information that we might not have a field for elsewhere. So for example, maybe you want to record a driver's license number or some other identification number. You can add additional fields to enter any other additional information you want in there. And the information tab, this can be a useful tab if you've got rent arrears or you want to see the current rent status of a tenant. This tab is automatically filled in for you. So if I press save, now when I create the tenant for the first time, I'll be asked to enter what the initial rent amount is. This is the rent amount that they pay on the day they move in. So let's just keep things simple, 100. And I'll save that. So there's my new tenant. If I go back into this tenant again, you'll see all the other tabs are now enabled. If we go back to the contacts tab, you'll see it's different to the way it was before. We can now add additional contacts. So maybe we'll put the wife, so we can got the husband and the wife. We can choose which one is the primary contact. So we can create as many different contacts in here as we like. Rent changes tab. This is the first rent change that I created. Remember, I created it as 100 per week. We can also add additional rent changes. So let's say maybe at some future date, on this date here, we want the rent to change to that. So I can preload those if I want to, and I can go back and edit those if I haven't quite got them right. On the notes tab, this here is the tab where we can add any additional notes that we want, any additional information. On the attachments tab, we can add any additional files such as photos or tenancy agreements. The letters tab, these letters are created automatically for you when you go and do a mail merge. So if you do a mail merge to this tenant, the generated letter will appear in here. There'll be a separate tutorial on mail merge. The bonds deposits tab, this is where you can enter information about the amount of bond that you have received or paid out for this particular tenant. So let's say that on this date here we received an amount of 100, money coming in and the reason, so it might be an initial bond amount received. And then later I might add that we had 80 going out for some reason. And you can see the balance of the account there. You can see it's this plus 100 minus 80 and the closing balance of 20. So this here is just really mainly for your information. It doesn't really have any financial implications elsewhere. It's just for your records. There's a separate tutorial on extra charges, and there's also a separate tutorial on inspections. The information tab, if we take a look at this now, we can see that the first rent amount is due here as well. So I'm going to save this. Another thing that I can do is if I create a tenant, tenant number 3, pick a property, but this time I'm going to enter a date in the past. So I've gone quite a long way back. Now this is the sort of thing that you would do if you're loading a whole lot of tenants. You're using RentHQ for the first time and you're loading up a whole lot of tenants. You'll enter in the date that they first moved in, and that could be quite a long time ago. And when I save this tenant now, and I enter the initial rent amount, same as before, it'll give me another option. It'll say this tenant that you have entered has an old start date, and we get to choose one option. In this first option here, we can say what the rent balance is as of today. So let's say the rent balance as of today is 50, and I can press OK, and what that'll do is it'll save me all the hassle of having to enter in all the past transactions. It will just enter in an initial balance. The other option down here is I can enter, so I will have to enter in the full rent payment history myself. So in other words, it's not going to fill in what today's balance is. It will require me to go back and enter all the actual rent payments from the tenant to bring it up to the correct balance. This is the quicker way. This is the more accurate way. So it depends which way you want to go. I'll just go with this. And what that does, it automatically sets my balance for me. So over here the total due we can see is 50. And you'll see it's automatically generated all this history for me. Rent due of the amount of 0. Only down the bottom down here we have a rent due of 50 to bring it up to the required balance. So that shows you how to create tenants in RentHQ.